Sir, where are you coming from right now?
From the service. I just buried my mother.
Yeah? All right, let me see some identification.
The burial ended less than half an hour ago.
I'm not asking for an explanation. I'm asking for your ID. Put your hands behind your back.
Officer Daniel Harper had no idea what kind of mistake he was making. Within 3 days, his badge would be stripped from him. Within weeks, his career would be over. And before the year ended, his name would become a cautionary tale taught quietly in law enforcement academies across the country. The man standing near the grave wasn't just another civilian. He was Marcus Allen Reed, a senior federal attorney who had spent over 2 decades prosecuting civil rights violations. His specialty wasn't drug crimes or fraud. His job was holding police officers accountable when they crossed the line. Reed had personally helped send more than 40 officers to federal prison. His conviction rate hovered above 90%, one of the highest in his division. He knew the law intimately, especially the laws Harper was breaking, even before the handcuffs closed. What Harper also didn't know was that the entire encounter was being captured. Not just by a shaky phone camera, but by multiple cemetery surveillance systems positioned along the main paths. From the first demand for identification to the moment Marcus was pushed into the back of a patrol vehicle, every second was recorded. All while his family watched, stunned and helpless. Before we go further, let me ask you something. Have you ever been treated unfairly by someone in a position of power? Let people know in the comments. Marcus Allen Reed was 56 years old. He served as a lead trial attorney within the federal government civil rights unit. His work focused almost entirely on police misconduct cases, unlawful stops, false arrests, excessive force. Reed graduated from Morehouse College, finishing near the top of his class. He went on to earn his law degree from Columbia Law School, where he became an editor on the Law Review. Early in his career, he worked as a public defender in Newark, representing clients who couldn't afford legal counsel. For nearly 7 years, he stood beside people who felt invisible to the system. Eventually, the federal government recruited him. For more than 21 years, Marcus built cases against officers who abused their authority. He testified before legislative committees. His written opinions were used in national training materials. His reputation was solid, feared by bad cops, respected by good ones. But on this particular morning, Marcus Reed wasn't a federal prosecutor. He was simply a son. His mother, Evelyn Reed, had raised him alone after his father passed away. She worked as a respiratory therapist for 4 decades, caring for patients night after night. After a long illness, she died earlier that fall. Marcus spent her final months by her side. That morning, he stood in a quiet cemetery, dressed in a black suit, trying to say goodbye. Officer Daniel Harper never bothered to ask that part. Officer Daniel Harper wasn't new to complaints. At 35 years old, he had already spent nearly 9 years on patrol. He worked in an area the department described as quiet and high-value, upscale neighborhoods, private schools, country clubs, and historic grounds. One of those places was Oak Ridge Memorial Cemetery. On paper, Harper looked average, but internally his record told a different story. Over the years, 16 formal complaints had been filed against him. 12 came from Black or Latino civilians. Most of them described the same thing: being stopped without explanation, questioned aggressively, and treated as if they didn't belong. 9 complaints involved stops with no clear legal basis. 5 were forwarded to internal affairs. Every single one was closed, insufficient evidence, no corroboration, officer acted within discretion, case after case dismissed. There was another detail that quietly followed Harper's name. In 7 of those incidents, there was no body camera footage. Each time Harper gave the same explanation: technical failure, battery issues, corrupted files. Somehow the camera only failed during contested encounters. No one pressed him on it. In 2022, Harper detained a black insurance adjuster photographing storm damage. The man was held roadside for almost an hour, no charges filed. In 2024, he stopped a Latino maintenance crew at a private golf course, demanded work authorization, and called for backup. Supervisors later issued Harper a verbal reminder. That was it. Months later, he questioned a black woman walking her dog through her own gated community. She lived there. The complaint was closed. The pattern was visible, but patterns don't stop themselves. Saturday morning, October 21st, Oak Ridge Memorial Cemetery was quiet. The cemetery had stood since 1904, its stone pathways lined with old oaks and iron benches. Families from the city's wealthiest districts had buried their loved ones there for generations. The sky was overcast. Leaves drifted down slowly. It was the kind of place people expected silence. At 10:15 a.m., Evelyn Reed was laid to rest. 71 people attended the service: relatives, former coworkers, church members, and longtime friends. Marcus spoke briefly, his voice steady until it wasn't. He spoke about his mother's hands, how they calmed frightened patients, how they worked double shifts, how they held his when he was a child afraid of the dark. The burial concluded around 11 o'clock. As mourners returned to their cars, Marcus stayed behind. He told his cousin he needed a few minutes alone. For nearly 20 minutes, he stood quietly at the grave, head lowered, funeral program folded in his hands. The cemetery caretaker, Leonard Hayes, noticed him from a distance. Hayes had worked there for 25 years. He recognized grief when he saw it. 200 yards away, Officer Harper sat in his patrol vehicle, watching. At 11:38 a.m., Harper stepped out of the car and walked straight toward the man at the grave. Marcus didn't hear the footsteps at first. His eyes were fixed on the fresh soil, the dark rectangle of earth that now marked where his mother rested. The funeral program was crumpled slightly in his hands, damp from sweat and tears. "Sir." The voice cut through the quiet. Marcus looked up slowly. Officer Daniel Harper stood a few feet away, one hand resting near his belt, his posture rigid and alert. "Yes?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "You need to step away from the grave," Harper said. "What are you doing here?" Marcus blinked, confused. "This is my mother's grave. We just finished the service." Harper scanned the area. "The funeral ended. You're lingering." "I asked for a moment alone," Marcus said. "I'll be leaving shortly." Harper frowned. "I need to see some identification." Marcus hesitated. "I'm at my mother's funeral." "I don't have my wallet on me." Harper's tone sharpened. "Everyone carries ID. Show me." Marcus sighed and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his driver's license, the one he had used earlier that morning to drive to the cemetery. Harper examined it, then shook his head. "This doesn't prove you're supposed to be here." Marcus stared at him. "What does that mean? I'm her son." "The service ended," Harper said. "We've had theft issues here, flowers, keepsakes. People pretending they belong." "I'm not stealing anything," Marcus replied. "I'm grieving. I need proof you attended the service." "Proof," Marcus repeated. "There were over 70 people here." "I spoke at the burial." Harper crossed his arms. "I don't see 70 people, I see you." Several minutes passed. Marcus remained calm, breathing slowly, trying to steady himself. "Officer," he said quietly, "I don't want any trouble. I just want to say goodbye to my mother." "Then show documentation," Harper said. "A program, a receipt." "Something?" Marcus lifted the folded paper in his hand and held it out. The front displayed a photo of Evelyn Reed, smiling softly. Harper glanced at it for barely a second. "Anyone could have picked that up." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "That's her face, that's my mother." Harper stepped closer. "Sir, you're refusing to cooperate." "I've cooperated with everything you asked." "I'm going to need you to come with me." Marcus stiffened. "Come with you for what?" "Loitering, trespassing, you're making this difficult." At that moment, voices echoed behind them. Marcus's cousin Denise and her teenage son Aaron were returning from the parking lot. "What's going on?" Denise asked, her eyes widening. "Ma'am, step back," Harper said sharply. "This doesn't involve you." "That's my cousin," she said. "We just buried our aunt." Harper reached for Marcus's arm. Marcus did not resist. He didn't pull away, he didn't raise his voice. Harper turned him toward the patrol car and forced his hands behind his back. The cuffs clicked shut. Aaron pulled out his phone and started recording. Across the path, caretaker Leonard Hayes rushed over. "Officer, I can confirm he was at the service. I watched the entire funeral." Harper snapped his head toward him. "Step back or you'll be detained too." What Harper still didn't know was that the man he had just handcuffed had spent his career putting officers in federal prison for doing exactly this. The patrol car rolled out of the cemetery gates slowly. Marcus sat in the back seat, hands cuffed in front of him, staring at the blurred trees passing by the window. He didn't speak, he didn't argue. The folded funeral program was still clenched between his fingers. Behind them, 2 cars followed, Denise driving, Aaron in the passenger seat, his phone still recording. Officer Harper radioed it in. 1 male detained. Possible trespassing. Subject became uncooperative when asked to provide proof of authorization. Every word was false. Marcus had answered every question. He had shown his license. He had shown the funeral program. He had never raised his voice. At the station, Harper escorted him inside. Other officers glanced over, noticing the black suit, the red eyes, the program in his hand. Marcus was processed for loitering on cemetery grounds. Fingerprint scan, mugshot, property logged. He was placed in a holding cell, still wearing the suit he had buried his mother in. Officer Harper sat at a desk nearby, typing his incident report. He wrote that Marcus was suspicious, that he failed to provide verification, that he became argumentative. None of it was true. About 15 minutes later, the desk sergeant on duty, Angela Morris, ran Marcus's name through the system. She froze, she stared at the screen, blinked, then leaned closer. She ran it again, her face drained of color. Sergeant Morris stood up and walked directly toward Harper. "Daniel," she said quietly, "do you know who you brought in?" Harper didn't look up. "Some guy hanging around the cemetery." "Why?" She lowered her voice. "That's Marcus Reed, federal civil rights attorney. Department of Justice." Harper stopped typing. "What? He prosecutes police misconduct cases," she continued. "He's testified before Congress. He's put officers in federal prison." The room felt suddenly smaller. Harper swallowed. "He wouldn't show proof." "Proof of what?" Morris asked. "That he was burying his mother." At that moment, Aaron's video was already circulating. 8 uninterrupted minutes showing everything, the calm explanations, the grief, the escalation. An officer down the hall mentioned the cemetery had security cameras. Another officer was already pulling the footage. Caretaker Leonard Hayes had arrived at the station, ready to give a statement. He calmly explained that Marcus had attended the entire service, spoken at the burial, and stood alone afterward. Denise and 2 other family members were waiting in the lobby, demanding answers. The station captain, Robert Lang, arrived shortly after. He watched the video, then he watched it again. Finally, he turned to Harper. "Hand me your badge and your firearm." "Captain, I can explain. You arrested a grieving son at his mother's grave," Lang said. "On camera, there's nothing to explain." Harper complied, hands shaking. Marcus was released from the cell moments later. Captain Lang apologized directly. Marcus looked at him, his expression controlled but hollow. "I don't want an apology," he said. "I want the body camera footage, the incident report, and Officer Harper's full internal file." The room went silent. Marcus knew exactly what evidence mattered. And everyone in that station realized this was only the beginning. The investigation moved faster than anyone inside the department expected. Within 48 hours, Officer Daniel Harper was placed on unpaid leave. Internal Affairs opened a formal case, and by the end of the second day, federal authorities were notified. Because Marcus Reed worked within the same federal civil rights framework, he was barred from handling the case himself. Instead, a senior colleague from another district was assigned. That detail mattered. It eliminated any claim of personal influence. Evidence poured in. Aaron's video showed nearly 9 minutes of uninterrupted footage. Marcus remained calm throughout. His voice cracked, but he never raised it. Harper, by contrast, grew increasingly hostile, dismissive, and impatient. Cemetery surveillance footage confirmed Marcus had stood alone at the grave for over 20 minutes, unmoving, speaking to no one. There was no theft, no disturbance, no suspicious behavior. Audio from Harper's body camera added another layer. At one point, Harper could be heard saying, "I don't care who you say you are," as Marcus tried to explain. The caretaker's statement was clear and detailed. Leonard Hayes described decades of funerals and grief. He said he had never seen an officer treat a mourner that way. Then investigators opened Harper's personnel file. 16 complaints over 9 years, 12 from Black or Latino civilians, repeated allegations of stops without cause, 7 incidents without body camera footage, 4 internal affairs reviews, all closed. The pattern wasn't subtle. It was documented. Federal prosecutors identified multiple violations. The primary charge was deprivation of rights under color of law, using authority to unlawfully restrict a person's freedom. Additional charges included false arrest, falsifying an official report, and threatening a civilian who attempted to intervene. 6 days after the cemetery arrest, Harper received formal notice. He was terminated. The letter cited conduct unbecoming an officer, violation of constitutional rights, and dishonesty in official documentation. But losing his job was only the surface consequence. The video continued to spread. Aaron uploaded it late Saturday afternoon. By evening, it had tens of thousands of views. Overnight, it crossed the million mark. By Sunday morning, it was trending nationally. Hashtags followed. Number arrested while grieving. Number justice for Marcus. Number badge abuse. Local news broke the story first. National networks followed. Headlines focused on the irony, a man who spent his career prosecuting police misconduct now experiencing it firsthand. The police department issued a statement distancing itself from Harper's actions and confirming cooperation with federal investigators. The union initially attempted a defense, but withdrew it within 24 hours. Marcus remained silent. He declined interviews. He made no public statements. He let the footage, the documents, and the witnesses speak. 3 weeks later, a federal grand jury returned an indictment, 4 counts. The case was moving toward trial, and Daniel Harper was beginning to understand that this would not end quietly. The trial began 6 months later in federal court. It lasted just under 2 weeks. From the opening statements, it was clear the case would revolve around one thing: the video. Jurors watched it in silence. They saw Marcus standing alone at a grave, shoulders slumped, eyes red. They heard his calm explanations. They watched Officer Harper interrupt, dismiss, and escalate. Prosecutors replayed the footage multiple times, pausing to highlight moments Harper ignored evidence, rejected reasonable explanations, and manufactured suspicion where none existed. Then they introduced Harper's history. 16 complaints, 9 unjustified stops, 7 missing body camera recordings. Experts testified about racial profiling and discretionary abuse. They explained how Harper's pattern fit established models almost perfectly, targeting perceived outsiders in exclusive spaces. The defense argued Harper was simply enforcing policy, that cemeteries experienced theft, that officers were trained to question suspicious behavior. The jury wasn't convinced. No theft occurred, no disturbance existed, no reasonable suspicion was present. When the verdict was read, the courtroom was silent, guilty on all counts. The judge addressed Harper directly before sentencing. She said he made a decision based on prejudice, not evidence, that he humiliated a grieving man at the most vulnerable moment of his life, that a badge is not a weapon and authority is not immunity. Then she announced the sentence, 42 years in federal prison. Harper would not be eligible for parole for 18 years. Gasps rippled through the room. It was one of the longest sentences ever imposed on a police officer for civil rights violations. But the consequences didn't stop there. Marcus filed a civil lawsuit against the city, the police department, and Harper individually. The suit alleged a failure to discipline, a culture of neglect, and deliberate indifference to constitutional rights. The settlement was massive, $12.8 million total. Funds were allocated for damages, punitive penalties, and mandatory policy reform. The police chief resigned within weeks. 3 supervisors were demoted for approving Harper's past clearances. The department was placed under federal oversight for 5 years. The system was being forced to look at itself. Still, Marcus had not spoken publicly until now. 3 days after the sentencing, Marcus Reed stood behind a podium in a quiet press room. He wore a simple dark suit. No badge, no title on the screen behind him, just his name. "I've worked these cases for more than 20 years, he began. "I thought I understood what victims felt. I didn't, not fully." He paused, steadying his voice. "When those handcuffs closed, I wasn't a federal attorney, I wasn't an expert. I was just a black man being told he didn't belong." Reporters leaned forward. "My mother spent her life caring for strangers," Marcus continued. "She worked nights, weekends, holidays. She helped people breathe. She deserved a peaceful goodbye." His voice lowered. "That was taken from her." Marcus didn't speak about revenge, he spoke about patterns. He asked what happens to people without lawyers, without cameras, without influence. He named the landscapers, the joggers, the workers stopped and questioned for simply existing in the wrong place. "I had resources," he said. "Most people don't." He called for changes, mandatory body cameras that cannot be disabled, independent review of complaints, and rules allowing juries to see an officer's full pattern of behavior. Then he ended with words that spread across the country within hours. "Dignity isn't something you earn, it's something you're born with, and no badge should ever have the power to take it away." The room was silent. Some reporters wiped their eyes. The case sparked national debate. Studies were cited, statistics resurfaced. The same numbers people had ignored for years. Black Americans were still far more likely to be stopped without cause. Complaints still disappeared. Patterns were still dismissed until someone powerful was affected. Daniel Harper would spend decades in prison. But Marcus made it clear this story wasn't about one officer. "It's about systems that protect misconduct," he said. "It's about warnings ignored. It's about accountability delayed until it becomes unavoidable." The department implemented reforms under federal supervision. Training changed. Review boards were restructured. Complaints were no longer buried, but the larger question remained. If this could happen to a federal civil rights attorney at his mother's grave, what happens to everyone else? Marcus left the podium without taking questions. Outside, the sun was setting. Justice had been served this time, but justice shouldn't depend on who the victim is, and until it doesn't, stories like this will keep happening. If this story made you angry, uncomfortable, or reflective, that reaction matters. Stories like this don't change anything unless people talk about them. Comment below and say what you think should happen when officers show clear patterns of abuse. Should complaints follow an officer or be erased? Should accountability depend on who the victim is? Read other comments, challenge opinions you disagree with, and add your own voice. And if you believe these stories deserve to be told, subscribe now. This channel exists to expose what too often stays hidden.